Hello again, woodworkers. So I wanted to talk about a different joiner option for, for anything. You could do tables with this. You can do any number of freestanding pieces. Specifically, this one I had in mind for chair making. And so what we've got here is a dovetail lap joint that goes into this little pocket that's been created here. And there's an incredible amount of strength with this joint. The glue surface, long grain to long grain here, are really where this thing holds together. However, if I can drop this thing in, okay. You've got a lot of other forces at play here. So the mechanical advantage of the angles of this dovetail shape really hold or lock this thing in, and it's going to be an incredibly strong joint if this were to be a chair leg and this is where going to be the seat would be. Any downward force here is going to start to carry through the angles that we have here and here, but more importantly, the shoulder that's being created on the inside of this lap is really, there's a lot of opportunity for these things to work and hold together with crazy forces that are in place. So, all right, so this is the after. These are just scrap boards here that I wanted to test this thing out with. So let's carry on with that. So I've got something that I'm going to try to do at this angle here. I would always recommend going off of your drawings to make sure you know what it is you're doing. Obviously. Okay, so I'm going to get the angle down here. Once I've got that, I want to draw where the shoulder line is going to be. The shoulder I've kind of carried over here so it's not too close to this outside edge. There's nothing wrong with carrying this joint all the way through so it can be seen from the back of this edge. But if you've got some shaping or some curves that are going to happen onto this 8/4 piece, then maybe coming in a little bit would make some sense. Okay, so shoulder line here. I want to carry these things around. Bear with me 1 second. So now I know what it is I'm doing. So this is where this thing looks. The thing that I want to do before I start cutting angles on the end of this board to match the shoulder, very similar to what's happening here and how the end of this board is parallel to the edge of the corresponding piece. And I think that's a nice look. It doesn't have to be there. You could cut this at an angle. You can do all kinds of stuff. But I think this has a nice relationship here, and this line that we cut on the tail piece is going to have a parallel surface to where the shoulder is going to go. So to start, I think this is probably an easy way to line these things up. What I want to do is mark off where the shoulder starts and stops there. And then before I start cutting the angle to match, I want to translate my dovetail angle off of the square end of this piece. And yes, this is debatable as far as how important the dovetail angle is. This is a 1:7 ratio, as it turns out. All right, let me carry these things down a little bit further. So I'm well aware of the debate, but I think it's important to start with a good reference. All right, so one line there. And if I were doing this for real, I guess I could use a sliding T-bubble, a larger one, to extend these lines over. But for what I'm doing, I really don't need much in the way of accuracy. The accuracy that I'm going to start to work off of is going to be critical when it comes time to translating depth of this cut. And so I need to match the depth consistently from one side to the other. So shoulder, shoulder. All right. So a couple of things. Hopefully you can see this. A couple of things. So I know that this is all going to be waist here, waist here. I know that when I start the cut, and I'm just going to cut these on the bandsaw, but when I start the cut, I don't know if you could pick this up. There's maybe 1/8 of an inch off of this outside edge here and the start of this dovetail shape. And I've done that from both sides. It's very difficult to start the bandsaw blade right on the very corner of the board. It's always easier. Let's say this is the bandsaw blade here. If there is wood on both the right and the left side of where that blade goes, and so that way it'll start to engage and it'll track right off the bat. If I'm consistently cutting with only wood on one side of that blade, then it's always going to start to skip on the side here and never really align to where I want. Okay, so first things first, I got that laid out. The next thing that I need to do is develop the depth of this piece. And so I need to make a couple of marks. Okay, so you'll notice here I'm way off of the center line here, which is totally fine. I've got a strong 1/4 of an inch here, what's going to create that interior shoulder. And that's fine. I don't need a ton of shoulder space here because I have a nice shoulder. I just want to have enough mass or thickness off of this dovetail part of the lap to allow me to have some strength that I need. All right, so I've got that. I'm going to carry this around quickly. And you'll notice that in doing this, I've got 2 different thicknesses of material for this. In my sample, these are the same thickness, and that's okay. If you have the same thickness, in theory, you can set up the marking knife, the marking gauge to be dead center. So I'll do a little test cut, flip it around, do another test cut to make sure I'm dead center. That's fine. It really doesn't matter. What I would prefer to do is always reference off of the same face for both of these boards. If I've done that, then it doesn't really matter if I'm center or not, as long as it's consistent. So same reference off of this board here, same reference coming down from there. That way I have the same target. If I have boards that are not the same thickness, I don't have a choice. I have got to do it this way. So, all right, so I have this mark there. Hopefully you can see that. I can't see it. I can see it now. Okay, so then all of this is going to be waste as well. Okay, so when I'm ready to translate this thing over, and again, looking at my drawing, I will then be able to reference this off of the same face, make a little mark, and then I'll know where I need to remove material from, and then this will be the waste side. All right, so that's a lot of talking about what to do. All right, so what I've done here is I've created my sliding T-bevel to the correct angle. I'll take this over, and I'm just going to use a miter saw. You can set up a miter gauge on the table saw to make this cut, that's fine. But miter saw for me is faster. I just need to cut this thing off. Then I've got a choice if I want to go to the bandsaw first and then remove this material on the bottom. But what I'm going to do, which I think makes a little more sense, miter saw first, and then I will take this to the bandsaw, cut off these little sections, and then I'll remove the waste on the bottom. So I'm going to miter saw, bandsaw these, and then I'll catch up with you here for removing the material on the bottom here at the table saw. So hopefully that's helpful, and talk to you in a minute when it comes time to putting these together.